Hi, everyone. Welcome. And today I have the interview that you've all been waiting for because I've persuaded Robert Tisserand, who I'm sure all of you will know is the absolute god of essential oils, to come and talk to me up close and personal. And I'm going to ask him some quite searching questions about how he became the Robert Tisserand that you all know. Robert, for those of you that don't, so those of you who've been hiding under a bush somewhere and don't know of him, is an international authority on essential oils. He's written the Bibles on the topic. He runs the Tisserand Institute, which is a great educational portal. And he also, at one point, built a brand of essential oils. And that's what I'm particularly interested in talking to him about, and his whole journey. So welcome, Robert, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Melinda.
Okay, so I wanted to start at the beginning, at the very beginning, because you've been involved in aromatherapy for over 40 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I was first introduced to aromatherapy when my mother came back from Paris with a book, French book called Aromatherapy. And that was in May 1967. And I know that because it was signed by the author, Dr. Jean Valnet. And that was my first introduction to aromatherapy as something that was more than some form of beauty treatment. Because I'd heard about it before that. In 1967, I was 19 years old.
So what were you doing at that time? I mean, that's for a 19-year-old boy, that's to pick up a book on aromatherapy. I mean, were you a sort of academic? Who were you at that point?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Who knows at 19?
What were you doing? Were you working at that
I just started going to college where I was studying Spanish and Portuguese.
Oh, right.
And I dropped out after a couple of years because I got bored with reading medieval Portuguese poetry. I'm not being funny. That's what we were studying. Yeah. And
but there's clearly always been a sense of the academic in you.
Yeah, I don't think it was apparent and until I got interested in essential oils, actually. And then I found out that they had chemical constituents, and I thought, well, I don't know about chemicals. That's not me. I don't understand this stuff. But I wanted to find out because it just fascinated me, the whole thing, the whole idea of aromatherapy just fascinated me. And it wasn't much known in the English-speaking world then.
Right. So was it its association with nature, because that was a time when everything was quite synthetic and nylon was being invented? Was it to do with the natural side?
Well, I mean, I was brought up in a family where we bought half of our food in the local tiny health food store, and my mother would go see homeopathic doctors and osteopaths, and it was that kind of alternative. Not radical alternative, but it was definitely that kind of lifestyle I was brought up in. And so I just grew up with an interest in alternative medicine. And this seemed like something totally new and different.
That's good. At that time, that was quite revolutionary, because I remember vegetarians were considered extremely odd back in those days.
And I wasn't a vegetarian. Well, I became vegetarian at about that time, at about 19, 20 years old. Yeah, that was my own decision. But my parents were not vegetarians.
Right. So where did you go from there? Tell me the steps that took you forward from there, from reading that book.
Well, it's quite a long story, but but 10 years later, I'd written my own book and just had that published came out in 1977. And in that in-between 10 years, I was trying to find out all I could about essential oils and aromatherapy. And I was going to libraries, trying to find books, trying to find research articles. There wasn't much. There really wasn't much. There was one book in German, 2 French books, nothing in English, and a few academic articles, many of them not in English. And there wasn't much research either. So one of the things I ended up doing was looking back in history, looking back in time, and reading old herbal texts in the British Museum Library, trying to find a little bit of, nuggets of information about essential oils, which I got very excited about when I did find them. And I had already at that time found a publisher, and I was in the library one day, and I just thought, I'm going to call my publisher. I have something I need to talk to him about. I said, his name was Ian, and I said, Ian, look, I'm in the library again. I'm doing some more research. When was our deadline? When did you need the book? And he just said, Robert, put the phone down, go home, don't go back to the library, finish the book, or something very like that.
That sounds like a publisher to me.
I've been doing this for, I don't know, a year or two, looking at these historical texts, and that's pretty much all I was doing. So anyhow, that led to this book, The Art of Aromatherapy.
So did someone, did the publisher approach you to write the book, or where did the idea to write a book come from?
Well, the idea to write, there was a magazine called Here's Health. I don't think it's still going.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was sold in the health food stores, and I thought, well, I can write an article on aromatherapy for this magazine, and maybe they would publish it. And so I started writing this article, and I think I had something like 3 or 4 pages of words, and I looked at it and I thought, this is more than an article. I never did send it to Here's Health. This is more than an article. I'm going to develop it, and maybe I could write a tiny booklet, and that's how it started. And when I realized it was, more and more material was coming, I was living in Muswell Hill in North London, and I knew that there was a publisher also in Muswell Hill that published books on alternative medicine. So I just walked over there one day, like 10 minutes walk, and it was a private house. I knocked on the door, and this guy Ian said, come in, have a cup of tea. What can I do for you? Sit down. I said, well, I'm writing a book on aromatherapy. Would you like to publish it? And I left with a signed contract. Wow.
Any money? Did he give you an advance?
I don't remember. I think I did get something.
Yeah. Okay. So the book came out, and what happened then? You suddenly get a huge response?
Well, the same thing that generally seems to happen when a book comes out. Nothing very much for a while, I at the time I was living in a council flat in Kennington in South London, and somehow I heard that this big glossy magazine, Harper's and Queen, the beauty editor wanted to interview me. I didn't get a phone call because I didn't own a phone at the time. I remember trying to find a phone box that hadn't been vandalized in Kennington, which was quite a challenge. So I could call Leslie Kenton and set up this interview, which did happen. And she did interview me, and I gave her the book hadn't quite come out yet, and I gave her my then expanded article as it was. I said, look, this, after we talked for about half an hour, I said, by the way, I have this, would that be helpful? Oh yes, could I copy it? So she copied it. And then I went off and didn't think much more about it. But I already had a mail order business selling essential oils.
Yeah, I want to ask you in a minute. Carry on with this story, and then I want to ask you how that started.
Well, so 2 or 3 months later, this issue came out of Harper's and Queen, and there was my article with her name on it.
With her name on it? Oh, you're...
Word for word. And I thought, damn, woman, you ripped off my article. And I really didn't realize that that's what she was going to do. But I wasn't angry for long, because she had put the address of what I was called then the aromatic oil company.
Right.
So if you want to buy essential oils, write to the aromatic oil company in the days when people, wrote letters and put them in post boxes. And I think within 2 weeks, I got 3,000 people saying, we want your mail order catalog.
Oh, wow.
And that did kickstart my business, absolutely.
Right. So tell me about starting the essential oil business. When did you decide to do that? And I mean, business wasn't sort of on your mind. So when did you decide to actually do that and why?
Well, the reason I started selling essential oils was because no one else was. And because I trained in massage and I would go to, workshops on body work and reflexology and healing and all this stuff. And people would talk about essential oils, but they didn't really know much about it or where to get the oil. So I just thought, well, if I can buy them in bulk and put them in small bottles and sell them for more than I bought them for, maybe that would work. And slowly that started to happen.
So where did you,
I would hand fill the bottles and hand write the labels. And
so how did you source them? I mean, were you, because obviously the sourcing of essential oils is really important and there couldn't have been that many people.
No, I mean, there's always been wholesalers. So yeah, it wasn't particularly difficult to find out where to buy them. What was hard was to find a wholesaler who would sell me less than a ton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or less than a drum, which is 200 kilos.
And you did this from the room in Kennington, did you?
From many tiny flats over the years. Yeah.
Right. So that was that helped you a lot, that feature. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how one feature or one influencer can talk about you, and it's like a pivotal moment for your business.
It didn't feel like it. Well, it did feel like it at the time. It did feel like it at the time, but it was still a tiny business. Tiny. I couldn't live off it. It wasn't enough to live on.
So how did you go off marketing? How did you start the sort of marketing it and building it? Was it the business went on?
Well, I had a friend who worked for me who drove around the country going to health food stores, saying, "Would you like to buy our essential oils and powdered ginseng?"
Right.
And
you did the filling. Were you there filling the bottles?
I did all the filling and the labeling. Yeah.
Wow. So, at what stage did that business change? As it grew. I mean,
it struggled on for many years, and then it went into liquidation, and I went bankrupt as well.
Mm-hmm. But we all. I mean, that's a really healthy thing to happen. No, honestly, you've got to be a great entrepreneur. You have to go bankrupt at least once, because it's such a learning experience. It's a real crystallizer of what you've done wrong and what you can do right. And clearly it didn't keep a good man down.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was very much like being thrown out on the street. I couldn't have a bank account. I couldn't own property. I couldn't have debt.
Shaming.
For
the sense of
years.
shaming in that.
For 3 years. But, I mean, lots of people over that first 10, 20 years said to me, "Look, Robert, get a job, give it up."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not working. And, but I was doing it because I wanted to do it.
Passion.
And, looking back, you can look back at those things and say, yes, that was a pivotal moment, but it might have ended badly.
Yeah.
I got lucky and it didn't.
Yeah. So how did you get lucky?
Well, I think I got lucky because I'm very careful with information, and most of my career has been in education, writing and teaching. Yeah. And I'm very assiduous and careful about getting the information right and learning how to present information in a way that's understandable and meaningful to the people I'm talking to or who are reading my books.
Right. So, but the business came back. The essential oil business came back in a different form.
Well, it went through quite a few incarnations of various people, and it still exists now.
So really, I mean, what I think the real lesson to learn from this is that your value, your research, your knowledge was actually worth more than the product itself, ultimately. I mean, you could turn that and use all the experience that you had and put it into your teaching and your work as a lecturer and your work writing books. And whereas the brand got your name out there, the Tisserand brand got your name out there.
For sure.
The high street.
Especially in the UK. I mean, in 2000, I moved to California. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew who I was. Whereas in England, I'd walk into a store to buy a carpet and show them my credit card, and they go, "Oh, you're Robert Tisserand." You know, just a lot of people knew the name.
Well, your mother helped with that. It's a little story about somebody that I was talking to a while back who remembered that back then in those days when he'd worked in a chemist shop, Robert's mother had gone in and introduced herself as Robert Tisserand's mother.
Yeah, she would do that.
You help with your PR there. That's great. Okay, so all right. So you've sort of been battered and bruised. You found a way of holding on to the value of the essential oil brand and getting it back out there through other people. Is that what happened?
Well, for a while, I was really multitasking. I was selling essential oils by mail order, even after the company started and was taken out of my hands. Went through these different incarnations, but I was also selling the same brand. I was buying and selling my own oils.
Under the name Tisserand?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Probably it was, maybe it was Tisserand Institute at that point. But mostly I was selling education. So I was selling oils, I was selling education, I was publishing a journal, and I was writing books. And I was trying to do everything. And in the early 90s, 91, 92, 93, that was when the retail market really took off in the UK for aromatherapy. And because I was still working with the business as a consultant, which I actually didn't mention, I didn't own it at all. And don't now, but I was working as a consultant for the business. Because they were doing well, I was doing well. So that was really keeping me going. And at the same time, I was still doing these other things, writing and publishing and teaching. So,
I mean, this is also an interesting lesson because your name became really important to that brand, to the oil company.
right.
And that projected the sales of the oils. And so, I mean, people often think that they've got to maintain total ownership of something in order to make money. They become very protective about products that they're selling. But really, often it's much better to have a small piece of the big pie than the whole piece of, of nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's worked well for the brand, the business, the essential oil brand, and it's worked well for me. Yeah.
So they do what they do best, which is the business side, and you do what you do best, which is the knowledge and the academic side and the educating. Yeah, absolutely. Did it feel like that at the time? I mean, because I think we go on these journeys and it becomes crystallized as to what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are. And sometimes the fact that we haven't managed to do something like the business going broke or whatever can completely destroy you. But you clearly were very sure of who you were as an educator and an academic.
I think you give me more confidence than I deserved.
You didn't have the confidence at that time.
I mean, don't think that I never had any doubts.
No, I'm sure. But in retrospect, concerns.
But I mean, I would say that there was a period in time when I really wanted to sell product. And then after a while, I didn't anymore. I just thought, I do not want to do this anymore. I'm done with this. I don't want to be chasing small retailers in far off tiny towns in England who owe me, £150. There's a check in the post or whatever. That's not me. That's not what I want to do. And I want to re-explore education and teaching. And it took me a little while to get back into that because I'd done a little bit and then stopped. And I got back into it, and that's really worked for me. And over the years, I have built a reputation for someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's authenticity. I mean, you can't,
yeah.
you know, nobody can challenge the real thing. And you put so many years into that knowledge and gaining that knowledge. But tell me about the journey building your reputation in the States, because that was like starting again. I mean, the book, presumably the book was selling all through this period.
Well, the book that came out in '77 is still selling, but it's not, you know, there's 200 or 300 other books on aromatherapy now instead of just being one. So that's not the same thing anymore. But what happened was really in 2010, well, in 2000, I moved to California, and 10 years later, I thought, right, I'm really going to get back into education now. I went to see a life coach. I went just a couple of times. I just thought, I'm not sure if I want to do this, and I need to go and talk to someone. And I just said to her at one point, I don't think I'm a very good presenter. Mm. And she said, well, that's just your ego. Just get out of the way so you can do what you were supposed to do. Okay, all right. That meant something to me at the time. That sort of hit
that moment.
Hit the right nerve in me. Just don't think about whether you're a good presenter or not a good presenter. Just do it, basically. And then I went to Taiwan, I went to Hong Kong, I went to Japan, Brazil, Shanghai. I went everywhere.
On invitation from connections that you've made. How did you meet these connections?
Well, they just started coming. Did you
call them in? Did you tell the universe to call them in? Or were they approaching you through your book, or how did they get to know about you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just started doing a couple of talks, and then people get to hear about it. Like, oh, we'll ask him to our conference next year.
And that to a large degree is because you're such a specialist in a very specific field. So, and that field was taking off. So it's about being top of in a small area. Being top.
Well, people, you know, I partly have a reputation for being the safety guy because I wrote a book on safety in 1985, and then another much bigger one in 1995, and then another much bigger edition came out in 2014, 4 years ago. And so I have built a reputation for being the safety guy, although I don't like to be just known as the safety guy. But yeah, I mean, if someone wants me to come and talk about, if someone wants a person to come and talk about safety.
So that's really a niche within a niche. That's absolutely a niche within a niche, isn't it?
Right, right.
And now I know that, you know, because we've worked together, that you've recently done an online course. I mean, the whole online world has opened up for you since then.
Yeah, probably could have done it a few years ago, but I'm doing it now.
Well, I think what you probably learned from that is you have to get a coach for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Every now and then, just change your direction.
Oh, Melinda, you're my coach.
Yes, well. No, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because you went to a life coach who said one thing to you, and that got you out there and got you motivated.
It did really help.
And
clear something for me, yeah.
If I can be so bold, and when you came to me, there was another crossroad, and we pushed you out, and that started something new as well for you, which is relevant to now.
Yeah. So just a couple of months ago, I offered an online training in safety.
Yes.
Yeah, within a month we had over 400 students. That worked well.
Yeah. So where's this going to take you? What's the next? Because the journey never ends. I mean, it gets more exciting as it builds momentum and you realize what you're capable of doing. Do you agree with that?
A nice thing about writing books is you pretty much only have to do it once. Okay, maybe you revise a book, but once you've written a book, it just keeps on selling, hopefully. You don't have to keep doing it. So, I mean, that's nice as an earner. You can't live on it, usually. You can't live off a book, or even a couple. But if you're writing and traveling and lecturing, that works together. The only hassle with traveling and lecturing is it takes up time and it takes up energy. And yes, you get paid for it. But again, it's difficult to live off that unless you're a really top class speaker in a, you know, and you're talking to thousands of people, which you really only get in marketing and stuff, and not in aromatherapy. It's not that huge of a market. So,
well, you say that, Robert, but what's the size of your mailing list?
Well, it's quite big.
I mean, we're talking tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, that's for one person, tens of thousands of people can generate quite a nice livelihood. If you...
No, but what I'm working around to saying is the online training is more cost effective.
Yeah.
Because you can speak to thousands of people without even getting on a plane. So, and it works for everyone. I don't have to travel. They don't have to travel. I mean, I'm still doing some traveling and I enjoy that. But it's good to have, you know, those different, to hit those different targets at the same time.
But you have this huge library of books and this huge library of oils as well. Is the passion as great now as it's always been to discover more things?
Yeah, to discover more information, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Long may it last, and I'm sure it's going to. But tell me, so just to sum up, what do you think in this whole journey? What do you think you've learnt from this whole journey? If you went back and had to start again, what do you think you'd do?
I'd do everything differently, I'm sure.
Oh, would you though? No, but would you? I mean, if you look back,
No, I think what I've learned is to just to try and get myself out of the way. Yeah, that one thing.
Get yourself out of
Don't get in the way of yourself.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, don't let your fears and anxieties get in the way. Don't let your doubts get in the way. Yeah. Just do it.
I mean, it's such a great time now to do it because we can reach everyone. Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Robert. I think we've all got to got to know you intimately here, which is lovely. And thank you so much for talking to me.
My pleasure.
And also, you're running your safety courses. You've got some online courses that people can actually do at the Institute, haven't you? We haven't really touched on the Institute, but the Institute is really the parent body for all the it's the learning portal, and it's where people go to buy programs.
Institute at tisserandinstitute.org.
Yes.
Yes, you can do a webinar series on skincare and essential oils and skin healing and essential oils. There's another webinar series which is more on the medicinal academic side of things.
So the skincare one,
class on the chemistry of essential oils starting next week.
Right. So the skincare one, I think, will be of particular interest to my guys. And what does that involve? Is that a series? How many webinars is that?
Nine webinars. So each one has a theme. So there's one on dry skin, one on oily skin, one on
brilliant
stuff, rejuvenating oil.
And that's totally, that's not a live course, is it?
It's recording.
It's all recorded, so they can buy it and watch it at any time. And it covers to some degree safety within skincare.
Yes, it does.
So that's hugely valuable to anybody that is thinking about putting essential oil blends. The non-aromatherapists in the group, that's really valuable to understand exactly. Does it include the sort of therapeutic values that would be added to products in the skincare?
Well, of course it does.
Of course it does. What a stupid question. Okay, so really it's everything that they need to know before they start throwing essential oils.
I don't know if it's everything, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant. So if you go on tisserandinstitute.org, you'll find that course there, and I would really recommend that you get it. And thank you so much, Robert, for being so candid. It's been lovely talking to you.
Do go to the website because there's masses of free information too.
Brilliant. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.